Welcome to the Courting Happiness podcast. This is a place where self-care becomes part of your day, a space where you'll learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter, turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare of suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness, and my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The Courting Happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in courting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, and the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 11. I'm so happy that you're listening. Thank you so much for tuning into the Courting Happiness podcast. I'm really grateful that you're here, and I'm also grateful and happy to say that our community is growing. We have new listeners from the UK and New Zealand. Welcome. I want to meet all of you. I hope you join our Facebook community at Courting Happiness Podcast Community. That's in the Facebook group. Again, that's Courting Happiness Podcast Community. It's a space to continue the conversation that we will have here, and we can do it online. It's really a wonderful space, and I'm looking forward to meeting each and every one of you. So every week, I always think about topics that I hope speak to you. Today's episode is focused on a topic that has spoken to me and spoken to so many people around me. And I thought, this is a great opportunity to talk about it. This episode 11, is focused on timelines. And I'm not talking about, the timeline that we would focus in on history class. Although I do love those timelines, right? I love history. But this is our own timeline. I was inspired by this topic by Norma Kamali, one of my favorite designers. People magazine published an article about her, and the headline reads, Designer Norma Kamali announces engagement at 75. We all have a different timeline, she says. In the article, it mentions that she and her fiance were getting through COVID together, and he proposed on her birthday. And I, again, wished him so much in terms of happiness and congratulations. And I'm so super excited. Was so excited to read that article. I get excited by anything, Norma. She is just incredible. At 75 years old, Norma is getting married. And I love the story, but I just love her and admire her. What I love about the article, though, is that Norma says this. She says, quote, we all have our own calendar. We all have a different timeline of when things are supposed to happen. How true is that statement? We all have different timelines. Think about it. What is your timeline? Have you done that to yourself? Meaning, have you said, at this age, I hope to achieve this, that, or, oh yeah, the other, right? Or do you value your journey, your path, your steps, and truly your own timeline? She later talks about her book called I Am Invincible. It can be pre-ordered and it's released on February 2nd. I can't wait. I'm grabbing my copy. I'm pre-ordering right after this podcast. I haven't had a chance to do it yet, but I plan on taking care of some holiday shopping more online tomorrow. And I decided I was going to treat myself to her book and pre-ordering her book because I cannot wait to read it. She also mentions this in the article. She says that her book is like a handbook on really the power of aging. or aging with power. She mentions and that if there was a handbook out there about your 40s or a handbook out there, about your 30s, um, that I believe her book kind of represents elements of really sharing tips and lessons learned. What is interesting is that as a college professor, I have witnessed students in their 20s questioning their timeline. So I love that Norma talked about the value of that, right? And where she is in life, and then kind of looking at it in terms of different age groups. But as a college professor, I have encountered so many students in their 20s questioning their timeline. A year ago, one of my former students gave me a shout out online. I just love shout outs. And she discussed one of our talks. And I remember that because she came to my office years ago to share with me that she was graduating this semester late. She goes, I'm graduating late this semester. And in the post, she mentioned this. She said, I told her, well, what do you mean by late? And I remember the conversation. She also mentioned this, and I added, I think you're right on your own time. I think you're right on your own time. You're right on time, and you're right on your own time. Our own time is important because it allows us to really truly embrace our process, our journey, our path. She added that I reminded her that it doesn't matter when you accomplish something, but how you made it is far more interesting. And it's right. It's the road that we travel. Is really creates this rich and deep and meaningful experience. I really believe we must embrace our own timeline. It may not be in sync with others. For example, when I decided to work on my PhD, I was in my mid to late 30s, right? That's when I started applying to different programs, and I believe I started in my late 30s. I graduated from the program at 42. So I did start in my late 30s. I graduated when I was 42 years old. If I followed another person's timeline, think about it. If I followed another person's timeline, more than likely I wouldn't have my PhD. I would have created this narrative and tell me if you've heard this before, or if you heard that voice in your head share this with you. Oh, you're too old for that. Like I could have created that narrative. Oh, come on now. It's what are you doing? I just don't believe in that. And I don't believe in that for myself. And I don't believe in that as it relates to any element, right? Is really valuing our own timeline. We have to embrace our own timelines. More than likely, when I have students coming to me, right? Well, when I say this, it's like when students are coming to me about like their timelines, and they're talking about what they're seeing on social media, and they're talking about really comparing, just doing social comparison. I love social media, but it can be very dangerous when we are socially comparing our lives to other people's lives, and possibly other people highlight reels of their life, right? So it's important that we understand our own timelines, because then when we do that, when we look at someone else and we see that, we're not going to immediately compare and say, oh gosh, I should be doing that too. Or, oh gosh, I should have done it during this date. Oh, she did it during this date. I should be there too. But what you'll say is, wow, I'm so happy to see what she's doing or what he's doing. And I'm so proud of me and where I am. So we have to be careful in terms of that. I remember seeing this. I'm not sure who said it because you know me, I love quotes. And I love sharing different quotes. Clearly, as I quote so much in terms of or cite so much as relates to these podcasts. But I love inspirational quotes. I remember I'm paraphrasing this, is that I saw something and I believe it said, that you're your only competition and really saying that really it's just it's all about you, and it says something like you're your only competition, and really who you are today, and then also who you are yesterday. I probably butchered that a little bit in terms of paraphrasing it, but really I think the real understanding of it is understanding about, I love that you're your own competition, right? But I think that's a large part of that, because I noticed that when I could be talking to students and they share with me, and I've gotten that when some adults have shared with me or adults have shared with me, right? But it's about embracing. If we embrace our own timeline, right, we're valuing our journey. I also believe in no regrets. One of my favorite authors is Bronnie Ware, and I have her book right here. And the book is titled The Top Five Regrets of the Dying. I love this book. A Life Transformed by the Dearly Departing by Bronnie Ware. I love this book so much. I actually gave this book out to a couple of friends and my dad, and he cherishes the book as well. What I love so much about Bronnie Ware's work in this book is that she lists five regrets, but I'm going to talk about one. And the one of really this one regret, um, I mention often. I mention it often when I'm doing speaking engagements and training sessions, and I mention it often just in general in conversation with friends. And I just mentioned it recently in with my students in my news writing class. But I not only mention it often, but I live by this regret, meaning it inspires me so much that I often think about it with anything that I do. So regret number one. So our first regret in the book is the one that really speaks to me. And regret one is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself. And think about it. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. Wow. I had to pause on that one because when you think about it, that is such a courageous move, a courageous statement, right? And I love it so much that I believe in making sure that I'm living a life that is true to me, true to myself. So when I was working on my PhD, my program was a full-time program. I felt that I kind of paused my life, elements of my life at least. But I also hit play on my purpose, my calling, and my love of service. When we live a life that is true to ourselves, we live a life that is filled with what truly and authentically fulfills us. I work to achieve that daily. And I tell you this, I believe that it can be a work in progress. For some of us, we may not be exactly where we want to be, but every day we're working on getting one step closer, or we're one step closer to it, right? So I love that regret from Bronnie Ware's book, because it really speaks to so many different levels of my soul. I really truly believe in that, living a life that is true to myself. Now, have you accomplished something that when that really is beyond society's timeline. Think about it. Have you accomplished something that is kind of beyond society's timeline? What was it? How did you feel when you accomplished it? I just told you I graduated my PhD at 42 years old. Was there something in life that you found yourself doing? Right? Was there was it within your own timeline? Kind of beyond society's timeline or other people's timeline? And how has the world, or really your world, changed? Has inspired others because of the steps you took in your path? Who did you encounter that allowed you to say, wow, I'm so grateful that I could share this experience with you? Let me tell you what happened at this time of my life, and let me empower you with this information. You know, the conversation, it may not flow exactly like that, but you know what I mean, right? It's experiencing something, and then you're finding yourself sharing it and empowering the next person. What was that? What was that accomplishment, achievement that you had that was really on your own timeline? I will tell you this. When I was working as a lecturer at a university in Georgia, I printed a copy of this article and I put it on my wall in my office. And it was published by Business Insider, and it was titled "The 25 people who became highly successful after the age of 40." I love seeing that. It also was great when other students could actually see it in my office, right? When they're coming through and they're looking. And I loved having that article kind of I had a lot of things hanging up on my wall. I'm that person. You guys heard it last episode where I talked about my inspirational wall. I love seeing things. I'm a very visual person and I love being inspired by things. So things that are hung up in my space speak to me. You know, I just don't have something up because it's like, oh wow, I'm just gonna put something up. Everything that I put up has really a deep meaning for me. And so that article discusses so much, and it mentions how I believe the average age of business founders are around the age of 40, which I thought was insightful information. It also talks about Vera Wang and how she designed her first dress around 40, or designed, her first piece of work around 40 years old. Mentioned how Henry Ford was 45 when he created the revolutionary Model T car in 1908. It also mentions actor Samuel Jackson, and him landing an award-winning role at 43 years old. And it mentioned Julia Child. Julia Child worked in Julia Child worked in advertising and media before writing her first cookbook at the age of 50. 50, right? Are you ready for this? She's one of my favorite actresses. Betty White. Betty White is an icon. Right. Matter of fact, I spent my over the weekend watching Hot in Cleveland and the Golden Girls, episodes of the Golden Girls. So according to Business Insider's article, Betty White didn't become an icon until she joined the cast of the Mary Tyler Moore Show in 1973. At that time, Betty was 51. Today, Betty is 98 years young. And I just love all things Betty White. But isn't that incredible? Right? Can you imagine if any of those people I just mentioned gave up? Or better yet, decided, you know what? I'm behind. I'm not even going to keep on moving forward in terms of some of these other aspirations. I'm just not. because, oh, I'm this age, or I should have been this when I was in my 20s, or I should be doing this in my 30s, or when I'm in my 40s, I should have been doing this. And if I'm my 50s, I should have been doing this. And now I'm 60 and I need to be doing the if they thought that way, right? Or now I'm 90 and I shouldn't be doing this, or I should be doing that. But if they thought that way, we wouldn't actually have benefited for some of their talents and gifts. I mean, like I said, I laughed so hard this weekend watching Hot in Cleveland, and I love the Golden Girls. One of my dearest friends, she and I talk a lot about all things musicals because she and I love musicals, and we love the Golden Girls. Can you imagine if any of those people gave up? The beauty is that they followed their own timeline. So along with getting my PhD, I'm not sure if I mentioned this previously, but I also have an MBA. And I decided to go to business school once I became a news director for a public broadcasting station in Baltimore. I started that position, I believe I was in my mid 30s when I started, right? My early to mid 30s. As you can see, my quote timeline right now, I'm leading into the PhD program, not quite there, but leading into it. So early to mid 30s. I will tell you this. I graduated top 10% of my class, and I was inducted into the Business Honor Society. It's this International Business Honor Society for business school students. I wear that with pride because going to business school and being surrounded by, I don't know, actual business majors. By the way, I was a news director at the time, and prior to that, I was working as a television reporter in various markets all across the country. Right. And so now I'm in business school. I'm in classes like accounting and finance and corporate finance, and I'm surrounded by business majors that are deciding on, they're getting their MBAs too. So I will tell you this. I'm glad that I followed my own timeline because it was challenging. It certainly was not easy at all. I worked really hard. That's why me sharing the fact that I can share with you that I, graduate top 10%, and I was recognized, and me and other students were recognized as top 10% of our class and inducted into this honor society. It's such a big deal because when I was in business school, I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. But what I did was I studied hard and I met the challenge. And when I did that, and when I look back on it, I love that because I love sharing the story with students who come to me and they may have some issues with certain dynamics, and they're learning something and it's not clicking yet, or they feel like giving up. I tell them about that story. I tell them about my time in business school and how challenging it was and how I worked hard and practice. And practice really does help. Was it practice makes perfect, right? And it was so rewarding. And it just paid off. All that hard work paid off. And I just treasured following my own timeline. So I love that I had that experience because think about it, right? Having that experience at that stage of my life allowed me to share it with others and empowering them to help them too. I'm also a proud B school graduate. I joined earlier this year, actually. B school, for those of you who may not know, is an 8-week online course which teaches you really online marketing, best practices, and so much more. I love that experience because of the community of meeting so many incredible business owners from around the world and to learn from our just incredible, phenomenal coach, Marie Forleo. Marie always tells us there's no behind in B school because they give you so much great information. And you're like, oh my gosh. And I'm still going through that information. All right. And I sometimes just go through it a couple of times because it's really powerful, great information that's shared within the group. But what I love what Marie shares, there's no behind in B school because that can speak to life in general when we think about it. So Marie hosts Marie TV on YouTube. If you haven't checked it out, you have to check it out. It is phenomenal. And one of the things that I love is that she has these Q&A, segments, and she answers questions from viewers. And I love it because she also shares quotes. And of course, we all know I love quotes. And she, really, she calls them tweetable, which I think is brilliant, right? Tweetable. I'm going to end our episode today with an inspirational quote by Marie Forleo. And this is what it says, and I'm quoting her. So I want to make sure I have this correct. So I've pulled it up. So here we are. So here's the quote. Where you are is exactly where you need to be. Trust the timing of your life. I had to make sure I pulled that up again because that is powerful. Where you are is exactly where you need to be. Trust the timing of your life. I hope you trust the timing. I hope you trust the process. Imagine how really your journey, your experience, imagine it benefiting the world. Think about it. I would have never thought in a million years my time in business school will be one of my most shared stories with people, especially students. Never give up. And remember this, that Courting Happiness, our community, is always here to cheer you on. I hope we can continue this conversation online. Join the Courting Happiness podcast community in Facebook. Don't forget, it's Courting with a K. Our private Facebook community is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? I hope you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. And plus, congratulations on your continued commitment to your Courting Happiness journey. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.